I didn't expect much when I moved in, just four walls and a fresh start, but almost immediately something felt off. Not wrong enough to run, just strange enough to notice. And the more I unpacked, the more the apartment began unpacking itself, one secret at a time. I moved in on a Thursday. The sky was clear, and the air had that weird, almost summer feeling to it, and the street outside the building was quiet. It felt like a clean break. I'd left behind roommates, loud neighbors, a job I hated. This place, it felt like I'd finally leveled up. Just me, Elise, and peace. The apartment building itself was kind of forgettable. Pale brick, narrow steps, the kind of place that's nicer inside than it looks from the street. A row of buzzers, a flickering porch light. One of those faded no loitering signs that's been ignored for years. It didn't scream dream home, but it didn't scream haunted either, so win. When I walked in for the first time, it actually smelled clean. Like actual cleaner, not just someone spraying Febreze over mildew. There was this faint lemon scent in the hallway, like someone had just mopped. Not a trace of dust, no weird smells, and no flickering. It felt neutral, empty but not in a bad way. The unit was small but bright. There was a big window facing the street and hardwood floors. The kitchen had more cabinets than it ever had before. It looked like it had just been renovated, the kind of place someone else paid to make perfect, and I just got lucky. For a second, I actually wondered what the catch was. I spent most of that first afternoon unpacking. Nothing unusual, just music on in the background with the windows open, organizing stuff and texting friends. The whole time I kept thinking how weirdly normal everything felt. This was my first solo apartment, and I expected to kind of feel spooked by the silence, but I didn't. That night, I didn't even put a show on to fall asleep. I just laid there looking at the ceiling fan and letting the quiet settle in. There were no creaks and no pipes groaning and no upstairs neighbors stomping around. Just soft city noise outside the window and nothing else. That's why the first sound hit so weird. The next morning, while I was making coffee, I heard this tapping, light, irregular, like something clicking against metal. I paused and waited, but there was nothing, just silence again. I shrugged it off. It was probably just the fridge, or maybe a pipe. But later, when I was in the hallway between the kitchen and bedroom, I felt it. This little drop in temperature. Not dramatic, but sharp enough to notice, like walking through a spot that hasn't warmed up with the rest of the room. I opened windows and checked the vents, and I felt around for a draft, but there was nothing. The windows were shut tight. The air wasn't moving. I checked the thermostat. It read normal. But still, every time I walked through that hallway, I felt it. Cold. Just for a few steps, like something was standing there breathing in. I didn't panic, but I stopped lingering in that hallway. I'd grab what I needed from the bedroom and walk back fast. No slow stroll, no standing around, just in and out. And every now and then, I'd sense that something was watching me from the end of that hall. I didn't start researching the place right away. At first, I figured I was being dramatic. It was a new place, and there were unfamiliar sounds, and maybe even some leftover anxiety. But after a few days of cold spots and weird dreams, and that feeling like something was following me down the hallway, I caved. I opened my laptop and typed the name of the building into the search engine. At first, nothing came up, just rental listings. A couple of Yelp reviews for the laundromat across the street, an old real estate blog that hadn't been updated in years. I almost gave up until I saw a PDF link buried in a dry city zoning document. It mentioned a fire in the building back in '96. It was on the top floor, an electrical issue. Two units were condemned and one tenant was hospitalized. There were no names, no juicy details, just a line that said, "Property deemed partially uninhabitable pending inspection." But here's the thing, my apartment was on that top floor. I ended up posting in a local social media group for the neighborhood, just a vague, "Hey, does anyone know anything about this building?" Most replies were jokes or bots, but one person DM'd me privately. She said their aunt used to live in the unit next to mine back in the '80s. Creepy ass hallway, cold even in the summer. She moved out fast. Said it never felt empty in there. That's when I realized something. All the stories I could find, they weren't dramatic. There were no exorcisms, no poltergeists, just people who left early. Leases broken and security deposits forfeited. Oh, it felt off. I couldn't sleep. I didn't like being there alone. The same kinds of things I was starting to feel. The strangest thing I found wasn't online. It was in the basement near the shared laundry room. An old bulletin board with curled up flyers and water damage. Behind one of the tacked up business cards was a folded note. I don't even know why I pulled it down. Curiosity, maybe? It said, "It watches through the hallway. It doesn't forget faces. No name, no date, nothing else." I tried looking deeper. I called the local historical society and emailed the city's records department. I even asked my landlord if anyone had complained about weird stuff before. They just said, "Old buildings make weird noises." But I noticed something. Every time I mentioned my unit number, people paused, like they were waiting to see if I was joking. One woman from the Historical Society did call me back. She sounded older, like she wasn't reading from a script. She told me she could only find 2 tenants listed in that unit from the last 40 years. There should be more, she said. The city's database is usually more complete. But it wasn't just incomplete. The info that was there had been redacted. One of those 2 names matched a blog post I found from 2011. The writer said she moved into a perfectly normal apartment, but it started feeling off. The hallway was cold and there were tapping noises. She talked about dreams where something stood in the doorway, watching. Her final post said she'd moved out suddenly. "I don't think it can follow me," she wrote. "I hope not." I sat there staring at my screen for what felt like an hour. Cold hallway, tapping, that sense of being watched. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the first. And if the patterns I found were right, I probably wasn't going to be the last either. I don't know if the activity increased or if I just finally started paying attention. At first it was small. Light flickering in the bathroom, creak in the hallway. But then it got harder to ignore. The tapping came back. Not every night, just often enough to make me wait for it. It sounded like fingernails on drywall. Slow, uneven, like something was thinking. One night I was brushing my teeth and I heard my bedroom door shut. Just a soft click, like it had gently latched on its own. I walked out into the hall and the door was wide open. I stood there, watching it, but nothing moved. The second I stepped back into the bathroom, I heard it. This time it shut hard enough to rattle the frame. A few nights later, the lights started acting up. Not flickering, more like blinking, fast and sharp. Like a strobe that cut once and then vanished. It wasn't just one bulb either. The kitchen, the hallway, even my phone screen dimmed and snapped back up like it glitched. I filmed it once, but the footage just looks normal, except the audio. There's a soft click on the track, almost like breathing. The cold spot became something worse. It wasn't just cold, it pulled now, like the air pressure changed when I walked through it. I started keeping a sweater by the kitchen. Sometimes when I passed through, the hair on my arms would rise like I was being shocked. And every time I checked the thermostat, but it was still normal and still lying. I woke up one night and heard whispering. Not loud, not clear, but rhythmic, like a chant that was just under the range of understanding. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. I stood in the hallway. Still nothing. But when I stepped into the cold spot, it got louder. I saw it once, in the reflection of my microwave door. Just a shape, darker than the rest of the kitchen, standing behind me. I turned fast, but nothing was there. I even took a photo, but it was just me. Except the microwave glass has a faint smudge where the head would have been. I started waking up at exactly 3:41 a.m. No alarms, no noise, just suddenly awake and freezing cold. Every single time I was lying on my back, which is strange because I always sleep on my side. And I always woke up staring at the hallway door. That door doesn't creak, but some nights it was open a little wider than it had been when I fell asleep. I started keeping lights on. I left my laptop open for background noise, and I slept with my phone flashlight ready under the pillow. I told myself it was just for comfort, but deep down I was scared. Not just of the activity, but that it didn't seem to want me to leave. The last thing that happened before I really started losing sleep, I saw it. Not a shadow, not a blur. It was standing at the end of the hallway, its head tilted and arms at its sides. It didn't move, but I swear I could feel it watching me blink. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just walked back into my room, locked the door, and sat on the bed for the rest of the night. That was the first time I considered moving out, but by then, I wasn't sure if leaving would even help. I'll admit, I didn't want to believe anything paranormal was happening. Nobody moves into a place thinking, hey, I hope I get haunted. I wanted there to be an explanation, one I could Google, one I could fix, something boring. The flickering lights could be faulty wiring. It's an older building. Maybe they just cut corners during the last renovation. The thing is, I've had bad wiring before. It doesn't target you. It doesn't wait until you're alone to act up. The cold spots, maybe air pressure. I thought about that. Old vents, maybe sealed shut but not fully. Except it's only ever in the same place, same width, same intensity, like someone marking territory. The 3:41 a.m. wake-ups, sleep paralysis is a thing, but I wasn't frozen. I could move. And it wasn't a dream. I was awake enough to check my phone. And why always at 3:41? Why never earlier or later? Maybe I just let the stories get to me. I read too much, started seeing patterns. Maybe the cold spots and creaking floors were always there and I just didn't notice until someone said that unit feels off. Brains are good at filling in blanks, especially when we're alone. But then again, there are too many things I didn't imagine. The sounds caught on audio, the microwave reflection, the note in the basement. I didn't make those things happen. They were just there, like they were waiting for someone to notice. So what do I actually think? I don't know. I want to say it's all explainable. I want to believe there's a version of this where I'm just tired, anxious, and overworked. But sometimes the apartment feels aware, and I've lived in a lot of places. None of them ever felt like they were watching me back. I've had people tell me you need proof, but here's the thing. When you live with something strange long enough, it stops being about proof. It becomes about survival, about making peace with not knowing. I've lived here for almost 3 months now. Sounds haven't stopped. Cold spot hasn't moved. And whatever this is, it hasn't left. Maybe it's just a building. Maybe it's all in my head. Or maybe it's been waiting for someone who wouldn't run. If you've ever lived somewhere that didn't feel empty, tell me. Leave a comment, share your story. And if you want more true horror stories, subscribe because this probably isn't the last one I'll tell.